Ethan Wells had never been superstitious. A software engineer, he lived by logic, not whispers of ghosts or things that go bump in the night. Which was exactly why he'd laughed when the real estate agent nervously mentioned that some locals thought the house had a history. The house itself was a 3-story Victorian on the edge of town, perched like a sentinel over a forest that always seemed too dark, even at midday. The price had been absurdly low, almost suspiciously so, but Ethan chalked it up to the property's age and the minor repairs needed. The first few days were uneventful. He unpacked, arranged his workspace, and marveled at the creaks and groans of an old house adjusting to its new owner. At night, he'd lie in bed, listening to the wind against the eaves and the occasional scurry of raccoons in the attic. Perfectly normal sounds, he told himself. But on the 4th night, as he drifted into sleep, he heard something different. A soft dragging noise, slow, deliberate, like something heavy being pulled across the floorboards, just above his bedroom. Ethan froze in the darkness. He was certain he hadn't stored anything upstairs that could shift like that. His attic was empty, or at least it was supposed to be. The sound stopped. Then, faintly, came a single knock, directly over his bed. The next morning, Ethan tried to brush off the memory. He told himself it was just the house settling or maybe a branch scraping against the roof. Still, his nerves wouldn't let him rest until he checked the attic. The entrance was a square panel in the hallway ceiling, with a pull-down ladder. He dragged a chair under it, tugged at the cord, and watched the ladder unfold with a metallic groan. A thick cloud of dust rained down, making him cough. Climbing up, he flicked on the flashlight app on his phone. The beam cut across the attic's cavernous space. Wooden beams, rolls of insulation, a few cobwebs. Nothing unusual. He let out a shaky breath, half laughing at himself. But then the light caught something in the far corner. A trunk. Old, heavy, its leather cracked with age. Ethan's curiosity sharpened. He hadn't seen the trunk when he moved in, and the real estate listing had promised the house would be completely emptied. He crouched and wiped a thick layer of dust from the lid. The lock was broken, as though someone had pried it open years ago. Slowly, he lifted it. Inside was not clothing or books or forgotten heirlooms. It was filled with dozens of Polaroid photos, each one showing different rooms of the very house he was standing in. Some were dated, with years scribbled in the corners. Others had no markings at all. But the most disturbing part was this. In every single photo, standing somewhere in the background, was the same shadowy figure, tall, thin, face obscured. And in the most recent photo, dated only 2 months ago, the figure stood at the end of the upstairs hallway. The same hallway where Ethan was crouched now. Ethan's hands trembled as he sifted through the Polaroids. Some of the older ones were faded, but the figure was always there. Never in the same position, never looking directly at the camera, yet impossible to ignore. The photo dated 2 months ago made his throat tighten. He glanced down the hallway from where he sat at the attic opening. Empty. Silent. Still, unease spread through him like ice water in his veins. Someone must have been inside the house, taking these pictures. But how? The locks had been changed when he moved in. The agent had assured him. He stuffed a handful of the photos into his hoodie pocket and shoved the trunk lid closed. As he climbed down the ladder, he felt the distinct sensation of being watched from above. Back in his bedroom, Ethan laid the photos out on his desk. He pulled the most recent one closer, staring at the dark silhouette at the end of the hall. Something about the way it stood, limbs too long, posture unnaturally stiff, made him shudder. Then he noticed something he hadn't before. On the back of the most recent Polaroid, written in spidery handwriting, were 3 words, "Do not look." The moment he read it, a noise broke the silence. A faint click, like the sound of a camera shutter, coming from the hallway outside his door. Ethan's head snapped toward the door. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. He told himself it was impossible. He was alone, the locks were secure, the neighbors were too far away to be playing some kind of prank. And yet, that sound had been unmistakable. The clean, mechanical click of a camera. He crept to the door and pressed his ear against it. Silence. Not even the usual groaning of the old pipes. Summoning courage, he twisted the knob and opened it. The hallway stretched before him, dim and still. A single bulb buzzed faintly from the ceiling. Nothing out of place. Then he saw it. On the carpet, halfway down the hall, lay a freshly developed Polaroid. His blood ran cold. Slowly, he picked it up. The photo was still warm, the chemicals not fully settled. But the image was clear enough. It was a picture of him sitting at his desk, staring at the Polaroid in his hand. Ethan staggered back, his breathing ragged. Someone or something had just taken this photo seconds ago, and they had done it from inside his room. His eyes darted back to his desk. Empty. No camera. No person. Just the other photos spread out where he had left them. Then, from the attic above, the dragging sound began again. The sound was heavier this time. Slow, deliberate, as though something massive was being pulled across the attic floor. Ethan's every instinct screamed at him to leave the house, to run until the looming Victorian was just a smudge in the distance. But something stronger held him in place. The gnawing need to know. He grabbed the flashlight from his desk and edged back toward the attic ladder. His pulse drummed in his ears as he pulled the cord. The ladder groaned open. Dust trickled down like falling ash. He hesitated, shining the light into the square of blackness above. Nothing moved. The dragging sound had stopped the instant he touched the ladder, as though it was waiting for him. Jaw clenched, Ethan climbed. The air grew colder with each rung. When his head finally breached the attic's edge, the beam of his flashlight swept across the empty expanse. The trunk was still in the corner. No footprints in the dust. No shadowy figure. Then his light froze on something new. A single chair, positioned directly beneath the attic's only tiny window. The chair was old, wooden, its surface worn smooth. On the seat sat another Polaroid camera. And taped to the chair's backrest was a photograph. One Ethan hadn't seen before. It was of him halfway up the attic ladder. Taken just seconds ago. Ethan's breath caught. He stumbled back from the mirror, heart hammering. Every rational thought screamed at him that he was imagining it, that it had to be some trick of shadows. But deep down, he knew better. The attic felt suddenly alive, as if the house itself were holding its breath. His flashlight flickered. He swung it around, desperate for an explanation. Then he noticed something at the far wall. A large, full-length mirror, leaning against the rafters. He hadn't seen it before, and he was certain he had scanned the attic. Its surface was coated with dust, except for a clear section in the middle. He stepped closer, and froze. Reflected in the glass wasn't him. Or rather, it was, but something was wrong. His reflection was delayed, moving a fraction of a second after he did. And when he raised his hand to touch the mirror, the figure behind him, tall, thin, face obscured, mirrored him exactly, only slower, deliberate. Ethan yanked his hand back. The reflection didn't. A cold whisper seemed to crawl from the mirror itself. "Do not look away." Before he could react, the attic door slammed shut below him, plunging the space into darkness. Ethan's stomach churned. The dragging sound grew louder, scraping across the wood beneath his feet. He turned to run, but the attic door remained gone, swallowed by shadows. His flashlight flickered again, casting a fractured glow across the room. Then he saw it. One of the floorboards in the center of the attic was moving, shifting slightly, as if something underneath was pushing against it. A faint, rattling hiss emerged from the gap. Without thinking, Ethan grabbed a nearby chair and pried at the floorboard. The wood lifted with a groan. Beneath it was a small, square opening, descending into complete darkness. The smell hit him immediately. Damp, metallic, and vaguely rotten. Something stirred below. The dragging sound intensified, circling under the floor like a predator stalking its prey. He peered down, heart racing, and the flashlight caught a glint of something human. Fingers, pale, thin, reaching upward through the gap. Ethan stumbled back, knocking over a box. The fingers twitched and vanished. A whisper, low and hissing, slithered up from the opening. "Come down, join us." Heart hammering, Ethan backed away from the attic opening. The whispers continued, overlapping in unintelligible murmurs that seemed to crawl over the walls. He noticed a trapdoor hidden behind a stack of crates. It was labeled and faded, almost scratched in letters, "Do not descend." The warning only made him more certain he had no choice. The attic seemed to close in around him, and the dragging sound from beneath the floorboards was now a low, insistent growl. With trembling hands, he lifted the trapdoor. Cold air poured out, smelling of mildew and something far fouler. A set of narrow stairs descended into pitch-black darkness. Ethan gritted his teeth and stepped down. Each creaking stair echoed like a scream in the silence below. The basement was vast, more cavernous than the house above suggested. The walls were lined with shelves filled with jars, photographs, and strange symbols carved into the wood. And in the center of the room, standing perfectly still, was a figure. Taller and thinner than any human should be, face obscured in shadow. It raised a hand toward him. Ethan's legs trembled, but he forced himself to move forward. The figure didn't advance, yet its presence was suffocating. The walls were covered with symbols, pulsing faintly under the flashlight's beam, almost as if alive. At the far end of the basement, a door slightly ajar revealed another chamber. Inside, the dim glow of candles flickered, illuminating a circle etched into the floor. Strange objects lay around it. Bones, rotting fabric, and more photographs, this time of people he didn't recognize. And then Ethan saw something that made his blood run cold. In the middle of the circle was a Polaroid camera, pointed toward a chair. On the chair sat a single Polaroid photograph, blank but warm, as if freshly taken. The image began to develop in front of his eyes. A horrifying scene appeared him, sitting in the chair, surrounded by shadowy figures. Only he hadn't sat there yet. The whispering returned, louder, angry, insistent. "Sit, join us, forever." Ethan stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the circle. The figure in the corner moved for the first time, stepping into the candlelight. Its face, still obscured, seemed to twist in impossible ways. And the Polaroid on the chair clicked on its own. Ethan's mind raced. He could feel the pull of the circle, the weight of the whispers pressing him toward the chair. Every instinct screamed to run, but the basement seemed to stretch, elongate, trapping him in a nightmare corridor of shadows. The mirror at the far wall reflected not only him but the shadowy figure behind his reflection. The surface rippled like water disturbed by a stone, and Ethan saw an endless series of reflections, each one showing him seated in the ritual circle, older, gaunt, hollow-eyed. And in every reflection, the shadowy figure was closer. Ethan realized with icy horror that every photo in the house was someone trapped, consumed, added to the house's collection. And now it wanted him. Desperate, he noticed a small hatch in the far wall, partially obscured by old shelves. Without thinking, he lunged toward it, yanking it open. A cramped crawlspace led upward, toward the faint light of the ground floor. Inch by inch, he moved toward the glow, ignoring the screams. "Do not leave! Do not leave! Do not leave!" Ethan crawled out into the living room. Everything looked normal, too normal. The Victorian house was silent, empty, seemingly unaware of the horrors below. He bolted toward the front door, flinging it open. Outside, the air felt like salvation. He gasped in the cold night, shivering as he stumbled down the steps. Then he noticed it. The Polaroid in his hand, the last one taken in the basement, was changing. Slowly, the image developed to show him standing outside the house, just where he was now. But behind him, in the doorway, the shadowy figure waited. Taller, darker, impossibly still. Ethan spun around. Nothing. The house loomed silently, almost peaceful. Yet the sense of being watched was unbearable. A soft, almost amused whisper drifted from the house, curling around him like smoke. "You may leave, for now, but we will always remember you." He ran into the night, not daring to look back. He didn't stop until the house was a distant silhouette against the dark forest. His lungs burned, and his legs ached, but every step away from that Victorian nightmare felt like survival itself. He found a motel in town and locked himself in, refusing to sleep. The Polaroids were in a bag by his side, each one a frozen reminder of the horrors he'd witnessed. He tried to burn them, but the flames died as if the images were impervious to fire. Days passed. He told friends he had moved on, but he never returned to the house. He avoided the neighborhood, and yet at night, in every shadow, he felt those long, thin fingers reaching. The whispers followed him in dreams, curling through the walls of his new apartment, through the crack beneath his bedroom door. "We remember you. We always remember." Then, one morning, he received an envelope. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid, himself, sitting at his desk, staring at the photo in his hands. And behind him, unmistakable, was the shadowy figure. Ethan realized the terrifying truth. The house didn't just trap people inside its walls. Once it had marked you, it could follow you anywhere. And now, no matter how far he ran, he would never be free. The house had claimed him, body or soul didn't matter. It only mattered that it remembered, and it always would.